Before we get started on the Dharma talk, please join me in invoking the Buddha's name 3 times. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Good afternoon, dear monastics and Sangha. Continuing on our journey with the Dhammapada, we are on chapter 5, the chapter on the Fool, Balavagga. And today we will be on verse 64. So we are almost halfway through the chapter. The 64 and 65 kind of go together, but I'm going to split them. Anyway, verse 64 goes, "A fool, even though he is associated with a wise man all his life, does not understand the Dharma, just as a spoon does not know the taste of soup." I'll repeat that a fool, even though he is associated with a wise man all his life, does not understand the Dharma, just as a spoon does not know the taste of soup. This story with this verse is also a very short one. It's about the Venerable Odai, who is staying at the which monastery was he staying at? Whichever monastery the Buddha was staying at the time. But the point is that he was at the Buddha's monastery. But he was a senior monastic, so he's been there for at least 10 years. But he was known as Bodhi Mandiata, which means someone who is spiritually immature, because he sort of the arhats that Quang went over was Sudipantaka, who was known for being an idiot and not being able to remember or memorize verses. Venerable Odai wasn't necessarily that bad, but he certainly was not a good monk, let's just say that. He was there just kind of to be there, which was unfortunate for his Sangha. But anyway, he had a habit that after Dharma talks, that he would go to the Dharma hall and sit on the Dhammasana. Dhammasana is kind of the Dharma seat that the monk would sit on to give Dharma talks. So like my seat right now would be the Dhammasana. Monasteries would have Dhammasanas, and regardless of the monastic's age, whether they are young or old, most respected. I'm not saying to respect, I'm just saying culturally, traditionally. I don't care for respect. It's not my problem, it's yours. There was a handful of visiting monks that came to the monastery and went into the Dharma hall as Odai was sitting on the Dharma seat. And so these visiting monks assumed, oh, this monk who looks old in years, right, must be a highly senior elder who has plenty of wisdom to teach us. So they would go up to him and ask him a bunch of questions. And at least the biggest question that I can find, that I saw in the commentary, was that he was asked about the 5 aggregates, the 5 skandhas. but he was unable to answer the questions because he didn't know the Dharma. So that's pretty much the story. And so then after that, the visiting monks kind of made an appointment with the Buddha. And was like, what's up with that monk there who was sitting on the Dharma seat and wasn't able to answer any of our questions, who didn't know anything at all? Like, how they were kind of taken aback that someone who would be living at the monastery with the Buddha had practically no knowledge of the Dharma. And so they were kind of taken aback at that. And that's when the Buddha told them that even if you live with wise persons throughout your whole life doesn't mean anything necessarily. So that's the story. Again, it's a short story, hopefully a short commentary. But kind of following the theme of the previous verses in this chapter, right? This verse is really a caution against our passive attendance. Passive attendance in this case meaning being present without being engaged. That it should remind us that deep learning and deep and understanding requires participation and reflective understanding of the Dharma, of our practice, and not just mere exposure to it, right? I don't know how many times I've emphasized this to everyone, that the sheer fact of attending temple, attending classes, attending services is not going to do you much in your practice, in your journey to enlightenment, if you don't actually put any effort behind the active one. And so we can spend our whole lives, right, surrounded by wise people, surrounded by the Sangha practitioners, but still end up being a fool at the end. So the analogy here of the soup and spoon is kind of appropriate, because if you think about it, just putting the spoon in the soup doesn't mean the spoon knows what the soup tastes like, right? You can keep the spoon in soup for hundreds and thousands of years, but it still won't know the taste of the soup, right? Likewise, if you surround yourself by monastics or by your Dharma brothers and sisters, doesn't mean you'll learn anything unless you absorb the flavor that's surrounding you. This is really because of the nature of people at the end of the day, right? It may be in their nature to be cruel or lustful or arrogant, right? And all these other unwholesome kind of bad qualities or bad things. That they may be unwholesome in their speech, may be unwholesome in their act, or they have they're unguarded, and that their mind is unwholesome, right? So they're just inclined toward unwholesomeness, regardless of they're inclined toward unwholesome. So the physical presence of where they're at doesn't do much; it doesn't help, right? But they don't practice it, right? They will know, they can recite teachings and sutras and practices to you, but still inside, in their mind, they're completely clueless, right, to the truth, that they are unenlightened on the inside. And they have trouble answering questions in a kind of clear and understanding way that anybody would be able to answer them. Because the correct way to answer a question in the Dharma is to answer it according to the person asking the question, right? Because not everyone's going to understand in the same way. We all have our intellect and our wisdom and our understanding is all wired differently. And so one answer is not a one-fits-all in the Dharma. This is why you have tens and thousands of sutras in Buddhism. Because the majority of them are all duplicates, are all the same kind of teaching. Because the beautiful thing that the Buddha had done is that he would give Dharma talks and answer questions according to his audience. And so if he was teaching to someone who was illiterate or had low understanding or really didn't get it, then he would teach them and highly intelligent. Then he would speak to them that way, so they would understand. And so he would teach 100 different ways with the same kind of moral of the story, right? So he would teach them the Four Noble Truths 100 different ways, but it was all about the Four Noble Truths. It was dependent on whom he was speaking with. And so likewise, if we ask someone who is learned but unpracticed, then their answers to your question, right, kind of just a generalization instead of a customization. And so it'll be kind of obvious to see that they don't really know what they're talking about for the most part, right? And based on their ability to explain the teachings in a cogent manner. But this also, of course, all comes back to our meditation practice. Our meditation practice does not it does not. But our practice, if we practice meditation, then in a way that will be able to allow us to taste that soup, so to speak, right? That if a person isn't practicing the teaching, lost my train of thought. If a person doesn't practice the teachings, it's like someone reading how to drive a car without ever getting behind the wheel and actually driving, right? That's essentially what most people would be if you're a non-practitioner. And so it's always emphasized, especially in this chapter, that our knowledge of the Buddha's teachings isn't enough, right? We can't consider ourselves experts in the Dharma or Dharma teachers just because we know a whole bunch of teachings and know a bunch of sutras. And this is a kind of unfortunate circumstance, especially in many Asian countries where monks and nuns ordain for more politically correct to say. But a lot of times they ordain because, at young ages especially, because they come from poor families, right? And and the family's unable to feed them. And so they send them off to the monastery because they're pretty much guaranteed food and shelter, right? And so they go in it without the kind of the aspiration or the inspiration to learn the Dharma. They go in it because it's a safe house. They just kind of go about it as a job almost, which is unfortunate because when they are old and become fully ordained monks or nuns, right, where they have the title, they have the kind of honor, respect from the community, but in their minds, they chose their lifestyle based on a convenient livelihood. There is somewhere in the commentary, I'm kind of paraphrasing here, where I'm not sure if it was the Buddha that said this or somebody else, but it was mentioned that it's harder to remove right view from someone than it is to remove wrong view from someone. And I know that sounds counterintuitive, or we're like, oh, wrong view, you have a wrong view. But the principle behind this is if someone has wrong view, right? And in Buddhism, wrong view meaning that someone is ignorant. They're ignorant in not being able to see things as they are, right? That's what ignorance is in Buddhism. But if someone has wrong view, then they have, hopefully, the capacity to see the wrong view, to see the errors in their ways. And they have enough room for light to be shed to say, this practice or this understanding that you have is incorrect, let's fix it. And they're able to see the truth, see the light, and say, I understand this is wrong, I'm going to correct it. On the other side of that, someone who has right view, that knows the truth intellectually only, right? It's very hard to teach them because whatever you tell them, they're like, yeah, I know that, right? I don't need to know because I already know that. And so they just don't know, right? They don't actually know what they're talking about. They actually don't know what they're reading and teaching and learning. And so they know everything, but they know nothing, essentially, which is a terrible thing to be and to have. This, of course, doesn't go to kind of going back on the example of monks ordaining for the wrong reasons. But even those that do ordain for the right reasons can end up being bad monks at the end of the day, or nuns, with either corrupt views or incorrect views and understandings, and being more useless than useful. Kind of also piggybacking on one of the examples that Quang said on Friday was, I'm forgetting which arhat it was, but one of the arhats in the past life, it was Sudimantaka still. In a past life, that he was a really good Dharma teacher, but he didn't teach his students everything that he knew because he didn't want the students to surpass him. He wanted to be the best of the best. And so instead of giving the secrets to enlightenment, he withheld it and said, nah, you know what? I ain't gonna give it to you. I don't want you to become better than I am, which is kind of a disgusting act, actually. Which doesn't even make sense, in my own opinion. It doesn't make sense. Because, at least for me, my 2 cents of this, that if we were to continue to want the community to survive and to last and go on for generations, I expect my students to be better than I am. I shouldn't have expectations. That is one spiritual expectation that I'm going to give myself an exemption for. But I expect my students to be much better than I am. I expect them to surpass me in every way possible. By no means am I perfect, obviously, but at least a handful of my students are much younger than I am, so I'm going to use that as an excuse. I'm like, all right, you have more time than I do to practice, more time than I do to. But there's on the other kind of on the third side of that, there's a word for this in Pali that I can't think of right now, but it's a phrase that's given to people who are unteachable, basically, due to their karma, due to their lack of understanding, due to their unwillingness to understand, right? They're kind of just complacent. And the Buddha had always advised his monastics, and especially his lay disciples, to never be complacent just because they're following the Buddha. So in our case, just because we are Buddhist, that we should not be complacent in our teaching, in our studies. Even as monks and nuns, right? We shouldn't be complacent just because we're a monk. Just because I'm a monk doesn't mean that my job is over, right? I still study. I still learn. I still meditate. I still do everything that I would be doing as a non-monastic. But there are people out there who think that just because we're monks or nuns that we're perfect. On the other side of that, on the opposite side, there are people who give monks or don't give monks enough breaks, right? They are criticizing even the smallest faults of monks. But it's people like this who don't really realize how difficult it is to be a monk. And so all they care about is to criticize little stupid things that don't matter. But still, just because we're Buddhist, or if you are Buddhist, right? And I say this with caution, especially lay Buddhists, to not become complacent, right? Just thinking that we're Buddhist isn't enough. Because certainly just saying, oh, I'm a Buddhist, that's not how the mind works, I should say. I don't hear often, but I remember back in the day, where people wouldn't say this directly, but through the conversation, I would surmise that a lot of people come to Buddhism in search of a non-existent happy pill. That if they practice Buddhism, that somehow all their problems will just magically melt away. That all their problems would go away. That by just being or calling oneself a Buddhist or going to the temple or doing some readings, that everything will be okay. Well, it won't be, right? It would be like going to the doctor for an illness and he prescribes you medicine and you go get the medicine, but you don't actually take the medicine, right? So likewise, you can come to temple, you can get the teachings, but unless you apply those teachings to your life, you're not doing anything. You're not actually curing yourself of suffering. You're not curing yourself of your defilements, of your fetters that are causing you to suffer in this world and have that roadblock of not being able to attain enlightenment. So just because you're with wise persons, and you can be with wise persons all your life here, who don't come to temple, who don't teach, who don't learn or practice or study the Dharma. And think of it this way, that good companions are only useful if you emulate them, right? So if you follow them, if you learn from them, but otherwise you just become a burden. You become a burden on them, and you're better off being without them. That's pretty much it. Short story, told you. The next verse is pretty much the quite opposite. It's about those that do know what the soup tastes like. So now we're in the verse of not knowing what the soup tastes like. The next verse, 65, is about knowing what the soup tastes like. Which will also actually be a pretty short story as well. This entire chapter has short stories and commentary with it because it's very straightforward. It's all about the fool, being foolish. And I know, I think it was last week that I teased Quang here and be like, I know what fools look like, I live with one. Right? Of course, he's not a fool. All the time. I'm very much foolish as well. So it's okay. But the point here is to being able to recognize our lack of understanding or lack of knowing, and not being complacent and not being passive in our learning. Being passive will be the death of you in a non-good way. Because we all want to die with our ego gone. We all want to die with a non-foolish mind without practice. And so to study is to practice, and to practice is to study. If you have one or the other, then you're only halfway there. If all you do is study, then you just become what's the word I'm looking for? Scholar, thank you. If all you do is study, all you do is following the practices blindly in a potentially superstitious manner. But if you study and you practice, then you apply those teachings to your life. You apply those teachings to your meditation and to your everyday life, and you can understand truly what it is to mean or to be free from suffering. You will truly be able to know what impermanence actually means, how impermanence actually is the substance of our entire existence. Because again, we know a lot of things very intellectually. We know intellectually that impermanence exists, right? We know that if I were to open this bottle of water and dump it out, that the water contained in this bottle will disappear, right? Impermanence. And if I threw this at someone's head, they'd probably bleed, and I may ruin them and give them a deep gash that will last forever on their face, right? So their beauty is impermanent. We know this intellectually, but to truly see it, to penetrate it, to realize it, is a whole different story. And that's where our meditation comes in. Because again, our meditation practice is what will allow us to taste that soup as the spoon, right? Our meditation practice will allow our mind, that is the spoon, to develop pores and become a sponge and absorb that soup. Without meditation, we are stagnant. There's nothing changing. There's nothing improving. There's nothing being developed besides stinky, old, moldy soup. Would you want to sit in stinky, old, moldy soup for the rest of your life? I would hope not. Okay, I'm going to stop there. Questions, concerns, emotional outbursts.
It's not always stinky soup, it's the knowledge. It's holding it, it's not absorbing it.
Right.
Not realizing it. It's just a lot of people getting analysis paralysis. They just keep analyzing. They're holding this knowledge, but not observing, not practicing it, not realizing it. But they are analyzing it. They're just like this paralysis, which doesn't let you do, doesn't let you realize that. So that's the reason.
Yeah, people have a very bad tendency of just superficially looking or analyzing at things, especially our teachings. Again, I'm going to use the example of impermanence, right? It's such at a very superficial level, if you analyze impermanence, I'm like, yeah, everything in the world is impermanent, right? Because you cannot point to anything in this entire existence, including our universe itself, and say, this will last forever. Nothing. You can't. Please do. If you know something, let me know. I'm curious. But there isn't, right? And so it's easy to know that. But do you see it? Do you feel it? Do you recognize it? Yes, sir.
So if we think about that and realize we're going to die, and yet most of the time we choose to put that out of our minds and not consider it at all, then we're not practicing, right?
Right.
So as we live, we have to think about dying at the same time, which is very uncomfortable. Because our ego says, no, I'm not here. I'm going to be here forever. Oh, wait, no. I'm still not.
Yeah. Our practice is definitely very uncomfortable. In general, right? To meditate truly is to be able to accept that things will arise that will be very terrifying, that will be very uncomfortable to sit with. Whether this is past negative experiences, trauma, this or that, it doesn't matter. It's guaranteed to come up. Most people think this is a bad thing, but it's really not. Because if it's coming up through deep meditation, that means it's something that you need, that the mind is trying to get you to recognize and to see that this is an obstacle toward your practice, that it needs to be addressed. But most people are like, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole again. I don't want to re-experience this experience or trauma or memory or whatnot, right? We suppress those things, and it's really not a good idea to do so. Because what you're doing is, the more you suppress, the more pressure you're creating in the mind, right? This imaginary pressure. And what happens when a cylinder has too much pressure? It explodes. And the mind is capable of exploding too, but not in a good aha moment, enlightenment kind of way, but in a bad way where it becomes debilitating, and it discourages practitioners to leave the practice, to let go of the meditation, because they don't want to go back to that, right? They're like, I don't want to experience that again. I don't want to have to go through that again. So they abandon it altogether. That's not helpful. And so to live life, as Leon mentioned, is to know that life will end. Which sounds depressing, probably to some. But at the same time, it should also inspire you to want to do something before time runs out. And unfortunately, we live in a world and society where you work for 60-something years, right, and then you retire, and then you have a decade maybe to enjoy the rest of your life, right? Like, oh, I'll worry about that when I retire. I'll worry about that tomorrow. I'll worry about that one for the next job or for the next kid or for whatever it is, right? You're just pushing things off, thinking that you have time. But you don't have any time. Time is not guaranteed. Life is not guaranteed. Right? And so to wait, right? And we see this a lot in older people, at least in my experience, and in my own family too, right? The older my family gets, the more religious they become. Like, all right, I'm retired, I got nothing else to do, might as well worry about going to heaven or hell now. Well, it's too late. It's not too late, but at the same time, it is kind of too late. From the Buddhist perspective, it's a little bit too late, because trying to enlighten the mind is not going to happen within the 10 years you have left of life, enjoying life, 10 or something years. Being able to discover the truth is time consuming, especially when you've lived your entire life not thinking about the truth necessarily, not living a life that is moral, ethical, and full of wisdom. And so by the time you do have to sit down with your own mind and go through all that, you have a whole lifetime of unwholesome deeds and actions and thoughts and traumas and experiences to go over and get over. Which isn't a bad thing necessarily, right? It doesn't mean that it is too late, but that just means that it'll require more time that you have to give in order to get over those experiences. And so usually you'll hear Venerable Abbot sometimes say, especially when there's younger folks in our Sangha, he commends them at the highest level. Because the younger you are that you come into this path of enlightenment, the more likely you are to discover the truth and to recognize the obstacles that are in the mind that hold us back from enlightenment. Point is, study and practice.
I think the way I see it, the knowledge gained through the practice is the real truth of the wisdom. But knowledge gained without the practice is nothing. It's basically it doesn't bring you wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
You just get us accumulate like that. Always but doesn't do any good. It's not wisdom.
Right.
So you have to practice with that and all of that, experience, see, like Buddha saw that person and all. And most people don't see, in my whole life, I didn't see that person. So I know what that is like. So that's where like people really don't experience. They have the knowledge, but that's just the knowledge. It's not like truth. It's not the wisdom. And that's I think it looks like this is a catch-22, where like we just keep gathering the knowledge, but we don't realize what the practical, what practice is.
I think the practice is integrated knowledge. Yeah. So if you have the knowledge, but not the enlightenment, but through the study, you take that knowledge and transform it into wisdom.
Yeah, I mean, that's what yeah, but like stay like that spoon of soup.
We have to also remember that knowledge and wisdom are not the same thing, right? Knowledge is learned, wisdom is attained. So using an actual example of soup, let's say you have a recipe to make soup, right? You know what's in the soup, you know how to cook it, you know how long to cook it, you know what goes into it and how to prepare it. But unless you ever taste the soup, you will never know if that soup is actually good or not, right? And so it's one thing just to prepare soup and give it, right? Well, you know you have knowledge of how to make soup. You know you have knowledge of what's in the soup, and how it's made, and how it's prepared. But you don't have the wisdom of what it tastes like. Is it good? Is it bitter? Is it sour? Is it sweet? Right? And the other point you brought up is knowing death. Right, and I mean, you may know someone that has died, but you may have never seen the body, right? A dead person's body, which I don't know if it's necessarily a good thing for some people or not, but if you had ever seen a dead body, right, whether you go to a funeral and it's an open casket or whatever it may be, try to recollect the thought process during that time. Were you really thinking of death? Were you thinking of your own mortality? Were you thinking of how short life really is? Or were you just thinking, oh my God, I can't believe this person died. I can't believe I'm never going to see them or speak to them or hear them ever again. They're not going to see me graduate or get married or have kids or blah, 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 right? It's always one or the other. 99% of the time, it's the latter. They're not here anymore. Oh my God, I'm going to miss them. I'm going to see them, blah, blah, blah. But nobody thinks about their own death. Who wants to? Which is sad. I love the topic of death, right? I don't want to die, but I love the topic of death because it is so eye-opening. It is so enlightening to see, because death and impermanence go hand in hand, right? Impermanence is on a kind of grander, general scale, whereas death, we think of death as death of people, whereas impermanence is death of things, for the most part, right? And so when we think of or meditate on or contemplate death or impermanence, is always death. If we contemplate death, we're thinking of death of people. If we're contemplating impermanence, we're thinking of the death of things, which is the wrong way to look at it, to practice it. Because there's no such thing as just death of people and just death of things. It's all death. It's all gone, right? To separate it, to make ourselves feel good, won't do you any good. But that's what we do, right? To guard ourselves, to protect ourselves, to make sure that we don't feel certain ways or that we don't go into sadness or depression or to even worry about it. Because who wants to think about death? Who wants to think about the death of loved ones or their parents or siblings or children? Most people don't want to, right? It's a hard pill to swallow.
We may not be aware that we're trying to avoid thinking about that, because we're just conditioning.
Right. We are 100% correct. Because as we go through our lives, we're conditioned to want to live long lives, to have healthy lives, to do this and to do that. I don't know what his name is, but some dude out in the world who spends like $2 million a year trying to look or stay young. He's like transfuses his own son's blood into himself to stay youthful. It's the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life. You're extending something that is, out of everything in the entire universe, is guaranteed to end. You're trying to extend and avoid that. For what? Because you're afraid. He is afraid. He doesn't have to admit it, but I know that he is afraid of dying. Most people are afraid of dying. Most people are afraid of dying because they're afraid of the unknown. That's it. People aren't really worried about going to heaven or hell. They're like, if I do this or I do that, I believe this, I believe that, then, that thought is just a byproduct. But the sheer fact of not knowing what happens next or after death is what terrifies people. Well, guess what? You're dead. You don't know it. You don't know any better, right? But people want to avoid that topic. But avoiding it isn't helpful, isn't enlightening. Anyway, I'm way off topic.
It's coming back to like we have been given the knowledge that and we all know that.
Right.
But we like what the death was.
Right.
What he saw, and then he realized, so he realized that, and he attained the knowledge. And we attain the knowledge of what we attain to study. And we understand, so it goes into our subconscious mind, and postpone it, like the other people, okay, let's worry about that later in life, and they get 60, 50, 10 years, we'll die now, let's attain the mana.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever, and then you see it, and then you learn.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the key thing we look like missing. That's why we are like that spoon.
Not being able to taste soup.
Yeah.
What makes our lives difficult in our practice is, as human beings, it's very difficult to override our beliefs. Because as you mentioned, when the Buddha went out and saw death for the first time, he had no knowledge of death because he was so sheltered from his father that he didn't know of what old age, sickness, and death look like. Right? So he had basically a clean slate. So the very first time he saw it, there was no prior information, no prior knowledge, no prior knowing that these things existed. And so when he saw it and realized or recognized what they were, he almost immediately had the mindset of wanting to overcome aging, sickness, and death, right? So there wasn't much to override. However, we don't have that luxury. And so this is why our practice is much more difficult, because we are literally trying to override decades of some conscious input from our environment, from our society, from our family and friends. But we are the admins to our own mind, so we have the admin password to override. So we have to utilize it. Okay, I'm gonna stop there. Over-talked, oversharing. Friendly reminder that on Saturday, this coming Saturday, is our retreat, one-day retreat, our 8 precepts retreat, our summer retreat. So we will not have some meditation class days. We, of course, will not have the class, but we will have the retreat in lieu of that. So I hope that I will see most of you there. It'll be a full day, so 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. I know it sounds like a long time, but it really isn't. Ask any of these guys. It's a blink of an eye. You do so much, the whole day passes, you're like, oh man. Anyway, so I hope to see everyone there. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and transfer the merits and then go to chanting. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha Namo Shakyamuni Buddha Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. For any positive karmic action we've accumulated here today, we wish to transfer the merit to all sentient beings and wish them full enlightenment. The incense in the censer now is burning, all the Dharma realm in every place, auspicious clouds appearing, our sincere intention thus fulfilling, as all Buddhas now show their perfect body. Homage to the incense cloud canopy, Bodhisattva and great Bodhisattva. In gratitude we offer this incense to all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas throughout space, and may it be fragrant as earth herself, reflecting our careful efforts, our wholehearted mindful, and the fruit of understanding slowly ripening. May we and all beings be companions of Buddhas and Sattvas. May we awaken from forgetfulness and realize our true home. Homage to the eternally abiding Buddhas, the supreme Dharma and sagely Sangha throughout the Dharma realm and the of empty space and three periods of time. Homage to the fundamental teacher Shakyamuni Buddha Maitreya, honored future Buddha Manjushri, great wisdom Bodhisattva, universal great conduct Bodhisattva, all Dharma guarding Deva Bodhisattvas and the glorious mountain assembly of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Om Eshu Amitabha Buddha in the land of ultimate bliss Avalokiteshvara, great compassion. Bodhisattva, great strength, Bodhisattva, earth stored great vow, Bodhisattva, and the assembly of great pure seed, Bodhisattva. The unsurpassed, profound, and wonderful Dharma is difficult to encounter in hundreds of millions of eons. I now see and hear it, receive and uphold, and I vow to fathom the Tathagata's true meaning. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha, Namo Shakyamuni Buddha, Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. A pilgrim briefly in this world, I am grateful and joyful to hear the Lotus Sutra. How hard to be born a human again, but I might hope to hear once more the Lotus Sutra. The Buddha moon is hidden, the sun of Maitreya not yet arisen. In the long night's darkness, in between only the Lotus Sutra sheds its light. The wonderful Dharma of the Lotus Sutra, whoever copies it, reads it, lives it, they say will be called preacher of the fivefold Dharma, with his 6 truths cleansed in the end. He who chants the Lotus Sutra is guarded by a heavenly. He wanders the world without fear like a lion king. Namo Sadharma Pundarika Sutra, Namo Sadharma Pundarika Sutra, Namo Sadharma Pundarika Sutra. Quang, which one are we on? Page 108. Namo Lotus Assembly of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Namo Lotus Assembly of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Namo Lotus Assembly of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. The Sutra of the Lotus of the Wonderful Law, Chapter 19, Benefits of the Teacher of the Buddha said to the Bodhisattva and Mahasattva, constant exertion if in the midst of the great assembly someone with a fearless preaches this Lotus Sutra, listen to the benefits he will receive. Such a person gains 100 benefits of superior eyes. As a result of these adornments, his eyes become extremely. With the eyes received at birth from his parents, he will view all the 3,000 worlds, their inner and outer parts, surmounted through their simmer, the higher being mountains and all the other mountains and forests, the waters of the great seas, rivers and streams, down as far as the Avicii hill up to the sun of being heaven, and he will see all the living beings in their midst, though he has not yet gained heavenly eyes. The power of his physical will be such as this. With the ears received at birth from one's parents, pure and without stain or defilement, with these ordinary ears one can hear the sounds of 3,000 worlds, elephant, horse, carriage, ox sounds, bell chime, conch sound, lute and harp sounds, pipe and flute sounds, the sound of pure and beautiful singing one can hear without becoming attached to the countless varieties of human voices. One can hear and understand all these. Again, one can hear the voice of heavenly beings, subtle and wonderful song sounds, and one can hear men and women's voices, the voices of young boys and young girls in the midst of hills, rivers, and steep valleys, the voice of the Kalavinka, the Jivaka, and other birds. All these sounds he will hear from the tormented multitude of hell, the sounds of various kinds of suffering and distress, sounds of hungry spirit driven by famine and thirst as they search for food and drink, of the asuras who live on the shores of the great sea when they talk or emit loud cries. He who preaches the law can dwell safely among all these, hearing these many voices from afar without ever impairing his faculties of hearing in the worlds of the 10th direction. One another, this person who preaches the law hears them all from where he is in the Brahma heaven, and above the light sound heaven, the all pure heaven, and up to the summit of being heaven, the sounds of the voices talking there, the teacher of the dwelling here can hear them all the multitudes of monks and all the nuns, whether they are reading or reciting the scripture of others. The teacher of the law dwelling here can hear them all, and when there are bodhisattvas who read and recite the sutra teachings or preach them for the sake of God, or select passages and explain their meaning, the sounds of their voices he can hear them all. When the Buddha's great sages and venerable ones teach and convey 'cause the faculties of his ears are so keen, he can distinguish and understand all these sounds. One who upholds the Lotus Sutra, though he has not yet gained heavenly, can do this simply through the ears he was born with. Such are the benefits he gains. The purity of such a person's nose will be such. Throughout this world he will be able to detect and identify all manner of odors, fragrant or foul, sumana and jatika flowers, Dhammapada and sandalwood, the scent, aloes and kasek. Oh, the scent of living beings, the scent of men and women. Though his preacher of the law dwells far off, he will detect these scents and know where the persons are. Wheel turning kings of great authority, lesser wheel turners and their sons, their ministers and palace attendants. He will detect their scent and know where they are. Precious treasure adorning the body, treasure storehouses in the earth, jeweled ladies of wheel turning kings. He will detect their scent and know where they ornaments that adorn the bodies of persons, clothing and necklaces, all kinds of paste and scents. By detecting these he will know who the wearers. When heavenly beings walk or sit, amuse themselves or carry out magical transformations, the upholder of the lotus, by detecting theirs, and know all this blossoms and fruits of various trees, and the aroma of butter, oil, the upholder of the suit, dwelling here knows where all these are, deep in the mountains and sea paths. Blossoms of sandalwood tree unfold, living beings are in the midst. By detecting the scent he can know all this, living beings in iron and the ground. The upholder of the sutra detects her scent and knows where all of them are, when male and female asuras and their retinues of followers fight with one another or amuse themselves. He detects the scent and knows all this on the broad plains and narrow places, lions, elephants, tigers, wolves, buffalo, and water buffalo. By detecting their scent he knows where they are. When a woman is pregnant and no one can determine if the child is male or female, if it will lack normal faculty or be inhuman. By detecting the scent he can know all this, and through this power to detect scents he knows when a woman has first become pregnant, if the pregnancy will be successful or not, if she will be delivered safely of a healthy child. Through this power to detect scents he knows the thought, if their minds are stained by desire, ignorance, or anger, and he knows if they are practicing good hoards of goods, are gold, silver, and precious treasures, things heaped in bronze vessels. By detecting the scent he can tell where they all are. Various kinds of necklaces whose value cannot be appraised. By the scent knows if they are precious or worthless, where they came from and where they are now. Flowers in the heavens of Mandarava, Manjushaka, Prajitaka trees, detecting their scent he knows all these. The palaces in the heavens up in their separate grades of upper, intermediate, and lower. Numerous jewel flowers, detecting their scent he knows them all. The heavenly gardens and groves, the super mansions and observatories, the hall of the wonderful law, and those taking pleasure in their midst, detecting theirs he knows them all. When heavenly beings listen to the law or indulge the five desires, coming and going, walking, sitting, lying down, detecting theirs he knows them all. The robes worn by heavenly women, when adorned with lovely flowers concentrating their energy, sitting in meditation. The upholder of the sutra detects her scent and knows where all of them are. Bodhisattvas firm unbending and while sitting in meditation, or reading the sutras or preaching the law for others. By detecting their scent, he knows them all. Third one, present in all quarters, revered and respected by all, pitying the multitude, preaching the law. By detecting their scent, he knows them all. Living beings who in the Buddha's presence hear the sutra and all rejoice who practice the detecting their scent, he knows them, although he has not yet acquired one. By a bodhisattva of the law of no outflows, the upholder of the sutra before then will acquire. He knows with the marks described here the faculties of this person will be so pure that he will never experience any bad taste, but at all times he is his deep, pure, and wonderful voice. He will preach the law in the great assembly, employing causes, conditions, and similes to lead and guide the minds of living beings. All who hear him will rejoice in awe in their finest forms, heavenly beings, dragons, yakshas, as well as the will all approach him with reverent minds and together come to hear the law. If this preacher of the law wishes to use his wonderful voice to fill the 3,000 worlds, he can do so at will, churning kings great and small, and their 1,000 sons and retinues will press their palms together with reverent minds and constantly come to hear and accept the law. Heavenly beings, dragons, yakshas, rakshasas, and pishakas likewise with rejoice will constantly delight in coming to bring alms. The heavenly king Brahma, the devil king, the deities, freedom and great freedom, all the multitudes of heavenly beings will constantly come to where he is. The Buddhas and their disciples, hearing the sound of him preaching the law, will keep him constantly in their thoughts and guard him, show themselves for his sake. If one upholds the lotus sutra, his body will be very pure, like pure lapis lazuli. Living beings will all delight to see it, and it will be like a pure bright mirror in which forms and shapes are all reflect. The bodhisattvas in his pure body will see all that it brightly what is not visible to others within the 3,000 worlds. All the mass of growing creatures, heavenly and human beings, asuras, hell dwellers, spirits, beasts, their forms and shapes in this very world. In his body, the palaces of the various heavens, upward to the summit of being, the iron encircling mountains, the mountains Meru and Mahameru, the great seas and other waters, all will be reflected in his body. The Buddhas and the bodhisattvas, whether alone or in the assembly, preaching the law, will be reflected, though this person has not yet acquired the wonderful body of Dharma, nature free of doubt. Because of the purity of his ordinary body, all things will be reflected in the minds of these persons will be pure, bright, keen, without stain or defilement, and with these wonderful mental faculties they will understand the superior, intermediate, and inferior law. Hearing no more than one verse, they will master immeasurable principles and be able to preach them step by step in accordance with the law for a month, 4 months, or a year. All the living beings in the inner and outer parts of this world, heavenly beings, dragons, human, yakshas, spirits, those in the 6 realms of existence, and all the various thoughts they have, upholders of the Lotus Sutra as a reward will know all these in an instant. The countless Buddhas of the 10th direct, adorned with the marks of a the sake of living beings. Preach the law, and such persons hearing it will be able to accept and uphold. They will ponder immeasurable principles. Preach the law in an immeasurable number of ways, yet from start to finish never forget. Because they are upholders of the Lotus Sutra, they will understand the characteristics of all phenomena, accord with principles, recognizing their proper order, be masters of names and words, and expound and preach. Understand them with these persons, preach in all cases the law of former Buddhas, and because they expound this law, they have no fear before the assembly, such is the purity of the mental faculties of these of the Lotus Sutra, though they have not yet attained freedom from outflows before will manifest the marks described here. While these persons uphold this sutra, they will dwell safely on rare ground, able to employ a Bodhisattva, never disparaging. At the time the Buddha said to the Bodhisattva and Mahasattva, gainer of great authority in the past, there was a Buddha named Awesome Sound, king of immeasurable supernatural powers, and with leading and guiding one and all heavenly and human beings, dragon spirits join in offering him alms. After this, Buddha has entered when his law was about to expire, there was a Buddha named Never Disparaging. The four kinds of believers at the time scrutinize and adhere to the law. The Bodhisattva, never disparaging, would go to where they were and speak to them, saying, I would never disparage you, for you are practicing the way, and all of your will become Buddhas. When the people heard this, say it in person reviled him, but the Bodhisattva, never disparaging, bore all this with patience. When his offenses had doubt and his life was ending, he was able to hear this sutra, and his six faculties were purified. Because of this mental powers, his lifespan was extended, and for the sake of others, he preached the sutra far and wide. The many persons who adhere to the law received each conversion from this Bodhisattva, who caused them to dwell in the Buddha way. Whenever disparaging's life ended, he encountered numberless Buddhas, and because he preached the sutra, he gained immeasurable blessings. Bit by bit he acquired benefits and quickly completed the Buddha way. Never disparaging, who lived at the was none other than myself, and the four kinds of believers who adhere to the law, then who heard never disparaging say, you will become Buddhas, and through the causes thus encountered numberless Buddhas. They are here in this assembly, a group of 500 Bodhisattvas, and the four kinds of believers, men and women of pure faith, who now in my presence listen to the law. In previous existences I encounter these persons who listen to and accept the sutra, the foremost in the law, upholding, reaching people and causing them to dwell in nirvana. So lineage after age they accepted and upheld scriptures of this kind, a million, 10,000 kal, and inconceivable time will pass before at last one can hear this Lotus Sutra. A million, 10,000 kalpas, and inconceivable time will pass before the Buddha's world honored ones preach the sutra. Therefore its practitioners, after the Buddha has entered extinction, when they hear a sutra like this, should entertain no doubts or perplexity, but should with a single mind preach the sutra far their age, encountering Buddhas and quickly completing the Buddha way. Let's go to page 171, tab 9. Heart of the Prajnaparamita, the Bodhisattva Avalokita, while moving in the deep course of Prajnaparamita, shed light on the 5 skandhas and found them equally empty. After this penetration, he overcame ill being, listen, Shadi. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form, form is not other than emptiness, emptiness is not other than form. The same is true with feelings, percept, mental formations, and consciousness. Listen, Shadi Putra, us are marked with emptiness. They are neither produced nor destroyed, neither defiled nor immaculate, neither increasing nor decreasing. Therefore, there is neither form nor feelings, no perception nor nor consciousness, no eye or ear or nose or tongue or body or mind, no form, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no object, no mind, no realms of Ella, no interdependent origins and no extinction of them, no ill-being, no cause of ill-being, no end of ill-being, and no path, no understand, no attainment, because there is no attainment. The Bodhisattvas grounded in Prajna, obstacles for their minds, having no obstacles, they overcome fear, liberating themselves forever from illusion and realizing perfect nirvana. All Buddhas in the past, present, and future arrive at Dhammapada Samyak Sambodhi. Therefore, one should that perfect understanding is the highest mantra, the unequaled mantra, the destroyer of ill-being, the incorruptible mantra. Prajnaparamita should therefore be proclaimed. Gate, gate, pada, gate, pada, sam, gate, bodhi, swaha, gate, gate, pada, pada, sam, gate, bodhi, swaha, gate, gate, pada, gate, pada, sam, gate, bodhi, swaha. Sentient beings are limitless. I vow to liberate them. Afflictions are endless. I vow to eradicate them. Teachings are infinite. I vow to learn them. Buddhahood is I vow to attain it. I vow that from now until the end of my life and in all future lives until I attain Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, that I will help all sentient in all realms of existence in their suffering. Namo, thus come one worthy of offerings, a proper and universal knowledge, perfect in understand and conduct, skillful in leaving the world through liberation, perfect and complete understanding of all worldly dharma, unsurpassed, untaming hero, teacher of gods and people, Buddha, the world honored. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha, Namo Shakyamuni Buddha, Namo Shakyamuni Buddha, Namo Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, Namo Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, Namo Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, Namo Mahasamaprapta Bodhisattva, Namo Samaprapta Bodhisattva, Namo Mahasamaprapta Bodhisattva, Namo Shittigarbha Bodhisattva, Namo Shittigarbha Bodhisattva, Namo Shittigarbha Bodhisattva, Namo Manjushri Bodhisattva, Namo Manjushri Bodhisattva, Shri Bodhisattva, Namo Samantabhadra Bodhisattva, Namo Samantabhadra Bodhisattva, Namo Samantabhadra Bodhisattva, Namo Maitreya Bodhisattva, Namo Maitreya Bodhisattva, Namo Maitreya Bodhisattva, Namo Great Pure Sea like Bodhisattvas, Namo Great Pure Sea mercy like Bodhisattvas. Namo Deva guarding Bodhisattvas. Namo Deva guarding Bodhisattvas. Namo Deva guarding Bodhisattvas. I take refuge in the Buddha, the one who shows me the way in this life. I take refuge in the Dharma, the way of understanding and of love. I take refuge in the Sangha, the community that lives in harmony and awareness. Dwelling in the refuge of Buddha, I clearly see the path of light and beauty in the world. Dwelling in the refuge of Dharma, I learn to open many doors on the path of transformation. Dwelling in the refuge of Sangha, shining light that supports me, keeping my practice free of obstruction. Taking refuge in the Buddha, in myself I aspire to help all people recognize their own awakening, realizing the mind of love, taking refuge in the Dharma. In myself I aspire to help all people fully master the ways of practice and walk together on the path of liberation, taking refuge in the Sangha. In myself I aspire to help all people build fourfold community, to embrace all beings and support their transformation. Reciting the sutras, practicing the way of awareness gives rise to benefits without limits. We vow to share the fruits with all beings. We vow to offer tribute to parents, teachers, friends, and numerous who give guidance and support all